Welcome to episode 65 of Reading Between the Reels. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're a new listener, we're so glad you found us. If you've been enjoying the show, please tell someone about us. Send a tweet, post to Facebook, write a review on your favorite podcast catcher, or just recommend the show to a friend. I'm Craig Dickinson, and I'm joined by my co-host, Corey Heichman. Justin Eldon's out this week, but we'll be back next time. How's it going, Corey?
Hey, I'm good to go.
Awesome. And today on the show, we're joined by Ross Hollebon from Fantha Tracks and the album Cockpit Podcast. How's it going, Ross?
It is going great, and I'm excited to be here with you, Craig and Corey. So I got my very own CNC Music Factory here.
Nice. Well, tonight we are talking about Field of Dreams from 1989. It's by the time this drops, baseball season will have already started as we record. The Giants openers tomorrow against the Yankees. Boo.
Yeah.
So we're excited to talk some baseball as baseball is about to get started and to talk about this great movie. So, Ross, I'm going to start with you. Why don't you start with your overall thoughts on the movie Field of Dreams?
I think it's a feel-good movie. It's a nostalgia movie. It is, I'm thinking back to Billy Crystal talking about baseball and City Slickers, where he's like, it's how you connect with your dad. Or it's a way to connect with a parent or a loved one in a simple way. And I think this movie tries to share that purity. And hey, it is the simplicity of baseball. It can make people happy. And obviously Kevin Costner doing great things from it. Major League Baseball turning it into an event, since they announced it in 2019 and outside of COVID, now we've had a couple games actually in the cornfield. So it's that piece to think about. It's a fantasy movie. Like, you think of it as a baseball movie, but it's really a fantasy movie in so many ways as well. So I kind of wrote a note saying, this is a simple film about a complex story, I think is one way that I looked at it as I watched.
Nice. Corey, what about you? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think when I look at this movie, I watched it again. I have not seen this movie, I would say, in 20 plus years. And it is not a movie that I would rank as one of my top movies. But having watched this with a different lens now, I think this movie is a great movie. It does show, it really touches on the pastime of America's nostalgia with baseball and what the game is and the stories that go into it, that it's not just the baseball. It's not just the name of the character, Shoeless Joe Jackson, or it's not just their name. It's the history and the story and the life they lived and sometimes the pain they had. And I think that's what this movie's about. But then it also turns and weaves this whole story in this field and into this kind of a ghost movie to bring back the ghosts of these legends and still find a way to kind of tell a story of what was, what could have been, and a life that was, and things that you regret, and trying to rectify regrets and fix your regrets. And so I'm excited to hear what we all talk about today, because this isn't a movie that I necessarily would say, oh, I want to pick down and watch this movie. It's a movie, after watching it, the conversations you have about the movie make the movie better than you thought when you were watching it, I think, for me. Because my wife watched part of this with me, and we sat down, we were discussing, well, what was this? And this, I didn't understand this. And we started having conversations, and as we did, it started to become more powerful, more relevant. And so I thought, okay, that's the point of a movie like this. This is a great tale. It's a great story with some historical fact characters that do exist. The thing that blows me away, this movie is 44 years old. Is that right? Is my math checking out there?
No,
34 years old.
Yeah, 89. So yeah.
34 years
34,
old.
34.
And so this is a movie that a lot of listeners may have never seen. I mean, you realize if you look at anybody that's, I'd say under 40, some of them, this may not have been a movie that they watched, may not have been a movie that has come up, in relevant conversation and time. So this could be something that spurs some people to think, hey, maybe I want to go watch that movie.
Well, I watch this movie probably once a year. I love this movie. And I was struck this time by watching it how much it's kind of a movie about time capsules in a way, but it also is a time capsule at this point. Like, this movie does not feel dated at all. It feels like it could have been released yesterday because it's a fantasy movie. I think it fits that, and it feels in a lot of ways like a very sweet, heartfelt Twilight Zone episode. It kind of plays by those rules, but it's not like there's a moral lesson that you have to learn, then you learn too late type of thing. You learn it in time in this one. And I love how magical it is. And I love that the magic is accepted so easily by Ray and his wife, especially, and his kid. And there's these rules to the magic, but they're never really explained. And I love the fact the ghosts are self-aware, and there's not danger in this movie. Like, it's just really sweet. And then I gotta say, I'm sure we'll get to this later, but every time, no matter what, every time I watch this movie, I get to the end, and when the lump is in his throat, Dad, you want to have a catch? Man, I'm thinking of like Troy from Community. My emotions every time. It gets me. I love this movie.
Yeah, and I think that's what I enjoy. I think what I enjoy the most about this movie is how much I know other people enjoy it. It's not my favorite sports movie. It's not even my favorite baseball movie, but I appreciate it. And my love of the game is something that I can appreciate through this film. So that is the part where I'm just like, yeah, this is a hug to baseball. And especially the nostalgia point that Corey and I both talked about as we go through the story.
And I think James Earl Jones captures that so well, and Ray Liotta both capture that exact sentiment in their speeches that they give. Ray Liotta, the first night he appears on the field, where he says, "I love this game so much, I would have played for food money." And the way he describes it, the sights, the smells, the sounds, you're drawn in. At that moment, in that part of the movie, I was like, this right here, this is baseball. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is a park. This is going to watch a game. This is having grown up, I played baseball, all through high school. And so that feeling is there. It brings it back instantly. And it's wonderful. And then James Earl Jones, when he's talking about his speech right there before he walks on the field, it is just glorious how you describe baseball. So it is that feel good emotion.
Yeah.
And so I recognize that. And so it is a great baseball movie with a fantasy tale.
So let's go ahead and start breaking it down a little bit. Let's talk about cinematography. So between composition, color, camera work, Ross, what kind of things did you notice on this watch?
I think even right from the get-go, knowing that this was going to go different places, it was set up in that regard with the Ken Burns effect, with still photos being used and shown and the movement of those. And Ken Burns, obviously with the role that he's played with baseball as well in storytelling, I think that's beautiful. It sets up through that opening and what they've shown through the composition and the shots that they're putting together of, we're going to look back at history here. We're going to have memories. And it's great to have a cinematography that tells that story ahead of time to say, here's the teaser of what's coming up. And we're not even really in the film shots yet. And once we do that, just the scenic, the establishing shots in this are amazing, but that's what you get. I'm in Indianapolis, so if I'm driving to Chicago or Notre Dame, or I'm going through cornfields relative to this, so I've seen these areas and sometimes too often. But you get that feel of peace. You get that feel of tranquility. My family in Western New York that I would go visit, I think about going to watch my cousins play baseball there. And it's the shots they set up that are either dawn or dusk. And they do such a great job of bringing those purple hues in, those pinks, all of those elements. And then in contrast to the cornfields and other things that are around. So I love how they set up their establishing shots, and they never had to get overly complicated. They're kind of old school paintings of Americana that you're getting. And that's the story that the cinematography helped tell for me, especially in the baseball realm of things.
Corey, what about you?
I think when I look at the movie, it is all in that cornfield. So there's not a lot of distractions. There's not a lot of things in the background. It's fields of green. The grass is green. You can hear the clay and see the clay and the dirt. And so I feel like it's very simplistic in its colors and how it feels old timey with a lot of green hues, like a lot of purple hues that you're saying, that kind of vivid ones that do stand out, but there's a lot of green and the lights in the background just putting off a glow, but not overpowering. And then the old uniforms. And so what I think of all of those things that they're doing, they're setting this nostalgia feeling of baseball, this old timey. It's not the modern feel of baseball with, a lot of color and flashy. It's a farm. It's a farm in Iowa, also known as heaven. And so I think you look at it and you say, it's a simple tale with fields of green. And so I love that. I love that part. The one thing with the camera work that I absolutely loved was the part with there's a lot of references to the 70s and the 60s in here. And so he's driving this old VW bus to go pick up Terrence Mann. And it was just very noticeable. Terrence Mann, they have all talked about the 60s and the part where the camera is back just far enough to see the little Peace windshield sticker on the VW bus, which is very fitting of the time and the tale that they're talking about, the references they make to the 60s. And so just little intentional things like that with the camera that they do are very well. And the way they move through the corn, they just do a great job with camera work.
I love what you guys are bringing up, because you're bringing up stuff that I had as well, but now I don't have to. Now I get to kind of dig through the weeds a little bit to find some other things.
You're digging through the corn on this one.
Digging through the corn. Yeah. But Corey, first off, I want to jump on what you said about kind of the natural lighting in this. I especially noticed that in the house, that it feels like it's lit by like the actual lighting in the house, like the lamps and stuff. It's a little bit darker in places, but not overly so. It feels real. It lends to that realism in this fantasy movie, I felt. The other things, I love how immersive it is. I love the fact that when at first you see Ray is pitching to Shoeless Joe and the camera is like over Shoeless, like you're the umpire essentially from that point of view. And then you get to see him hit the ball, and it's like that low angle, and you see that ball just travel. Because it's so low, it just adds to the magnitude of the home run after home run into the cornfields. But one thing I do want to point out, because I love how it's played for humor, composition-wise. You have this great exchange between Terrence Mann and Ray, and it's where Ray says, "So what do you want?" And then he goes on this speech. I want people to leave me alone. I want to figure out things for themselves. And then they pan around, and you can see there's this beautiful triangle setup where you have Ray's on the right or left, Terrence on the right, hot dog vendors in the middle, because he was talking about, what do you want? And just repeats the question. Doesn't have to say, what do you want to eat? The visual does it for us. But I love that just quick little trick of the camera there.
And I don't think it is, relative to the visit to Fenway. What I found very fun is I teach intro to sports media at Butler University sometimes, and we talk about promotional elements and sponsorship. It was nice to see this stadium back then. And when you're looking out at the Green Monster, you're seeing the Green Monster. You're not seeing this ad, this sponsorship, all of these elements. So you take that snapshot, and again, just kind of that wider establishment shot, putting us inside Fenway Park. And that's a fun trip down memory lane of, oh, wow, remember when baseball was this simple compared to what we have right now?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because my brother and I and our family went to Fenway in '94, I believe is when it was. And the one thing we remember looking for was the Citgo sign, because that was like the only, and it's outside the stadium. When you watch a game, it looks like it's attached to the stadium, but we're like trying to figure out where that was at when we were walking up to the park, and because that was the only thing, and that's what made it unique. And now it's, there's so many billboards everywhere, but I love, that's a nice pull. The last thing I had for cinematography is I just have to talk about the helicopter shot of Ray and his father playing catch. And then it pulls back to that super wide shot and you get to see all the cars just blinking on and off and just going off and basically into eternity from there. It's just such a beautiful shot and what a great way to end the film.
Yeah.
The thing about, I read that was an actual line of cars that they did. They did not, that was not a CGI. That was not a movie effect or, because you could film a small view and then just copy and paste it. No, they did an actual miles long train of cars. And I think it shows there's not a lot of things in the movie. I mean, that's a practical effect that you get in a lot of back then CGI just wasn't quite as big a thing, the movie effects, but I appreciate that now more knowing that type of thing, that you see that in this practical field they had to set up because there's more intentionality in some of those things.
Yeah, something after watching this and deep diving on it again, from the cinematography lens, John Lindley, who was the cinematographer for this, also did another one of my favorite films visually, which is Pleasantville. Mm-hmm. That he did about, almost 10 years later. I'm interested to go back, not knowing ahead of time, I didn't know that he did Pleasantville. As I'm researching this, I was like, oh, he did Pleasantville. Mm-hmm. I'm excited to go back and watch that now and see, okay, what relativity do I see from his framing and his approach for this film versus Pleasantville, knowing, again, how the colors worked in this. But then the colors are a character basically in Pleasantville and how that can play off of one another. So that's another exciting part that came out of watching this again for me.
Yeah, that's a nice pull. I love, that's one of the things I love doing research on this. And I start looking through what other films people have made and I'm like, oh, so that's why that connects for me on a subconscious level and to be able to pull those things out. So that'll be fun. I'll have to check that out as well. Anything else for cinematography? Or are you guys ready to move down to sound?
I'm ready for sound.
All right. So let's talk about sound. We got effects, the soundtrack by James Horner, and then any vocal sound. So Ross, I'll go ahead and start with you again.
Yeah. So for effects, my big note in all caps here is crisp. And as you're hearing that, as someone who, I'm a huge ice hockey fan. I played growing up. I played club hockey in college. The best part about hockey for me, especially as a player, but even as a fan, is when you hear the skate crunching into the ice and you know that it's about to start. And it seems like it should be smooth, but there's tension to it. There's that grab and that tenacity of it. And I heard that. And I felt like I was in the infield dirt or in the base paths as you're hearing it. You've got crickets going in the background, which was a beautiful thing. And it makes it a summer night in these areas. But then just that crunch into it. And it took me to the field.
Corey, I see you nodding your head there. What do you add to that?
I absolutely agree. Ross, I mean, I'm not kidding. I got tingles on my neck just thinking about this because I know exactly how, I mean, and I'm sure people can relate to this. Certain sounds take you back somewhere. They pull you in. They take you there. You can almost, if you were to close your eyes hearing these sounds, you would see it and you could almost smell what's there. Like you described with hockey. And they do this so well with baseball in this movie. I can hear the cleats walking on the clay of the dirt. When they go and Ray Liotta starts picking up the bats and starts kind of looking at the bats and pulls it, I could hear the ripple of the bag. And it was one of those things that so many Saturdays, I remember double headers and going and opening up the bag and pulling out the bats. And it just, that feel as it comes, it's almost like it's just a wonderful sound, and instantly right back there. I mean, the only thing I'm missing was a bag of peanuts, and I'd been sitting there going, I'm at the game. And so they whoever the sound grips were on this did a brilliant job of everything from the gloves catching. And those old gloves sound different than newer gloves when they catch. They have that big, thick glove. And they were using those, and they make a different sound, a little thud. And then when they were diving and touching the base, and you hear them throwing the ball and catching the ball, and the sounds instantly transport you into this movie. And I think you cannot fake that. You cannot just pull that off so easily. And it's something that they had to have invested an incredible amount of time to really do, to make that right.
Yeah, I'm loving this because I just basically had crack of the bat and balls hitting gloves, and like I love how you said it, Ross. They're crisp. It's so like it's again immersive. Like yes, I can almost feel the ball hitting the bat when that's happening.
And I think the only other note that I had there were the farm and farmhouse sounds. Like you're hearing that creaky screen door. You're hearing the spring on that as it's off in the distance. And that house is always, the house is the anchor for the field, and obviously we come back to it towards the end, and he's just like, hey, what's heaven? And it's, hey, it's what's important to you and what's happening. And that's often that look at the house with that, again, you brought it up earlier, the warm light coming through the windows, hearing that screen door opening, and it's again transporting you somewhere. Like I'm like, oh, I'm at my grandmother's house, close to Jamestown, New York right now. This is where it's taking me. And again, like that's the beautiful storytelling that occurs here in the different layers that they add to all of that.
Yeah. I want to talk briefly about the score. It's James Horner, and we've done multiple James Horner movies at this point. He did Avatar, which we've done, and he did Willow, which we've done. He's a ton of other things. Star Trek 2, I think, is probably my favorite theme of his. Of course, he won multiple Academy Awards for Titanic. This score, though, I think is really interesting because of the instrumentation. Like you can hear woodwinds, and there's chimes and horns and some soft piano. It's kind of a really eclectic mix, and yet it also is somehow old-fashioned and takes you right back into the 30s, which is really interesting. But I love it. I think I don't know if I can hum it necessarily, but it just evokes the feelings that you want it to.
I think when the players first appear, when all 8 guys come out of the cornfield and they're going to play that first time, you really hear that. I don't know whether it's 20s, 30s music. It has a very distinct sound, different than music that we have. It was the only way they could have made that anymore is if they had it on a record player. I mean, it just had that old 20s, 30s feel. They come out and they're running to the field all excited because, hey, we're playing baseball again. And they're, throwing the ball and getting ready. And so that was one of the times, Craig, when I noticed music. I always forget to notice the music. I always forget to pay attention to that. Yeah. And there were 3 times in this movie. You're making me pay attention more. There's 3 times in this movie where I noticed that, and that was one of them.
Yeah,
go ahead. It's kind of like a whimsical, fun Boardwalk Empire soundtrack. Is kind of how it got twisted here a little, and that's just that makes it more interesting as well. So, and especially as they time jump throughout, being able to do that with music is such a beautiful thing. Yeah.
And you have some great needle drops in this one. I love when you hear Willie Nelson's Crazy when he's talking, when Ray's talking to the other farmer to see if he's ever heard voices. What's interesting, it's actually performed by Beverly D'Angelo.
Yeah.
Which is not a version that you usually hear. But what a great thing. Like you just hear it crazy and like, yeah, that's what they're all thinking. But some other great ones, Daydream is playing when is Ray having a daydream? Like some of them a little bit on the nose. But I love Jessica, the Allman Brothers Band song playing while he's on the trip to Boston. It's just a rocking song. Like, let's go. You get kind of fired up and pumped for that. So you also, same thing with China Grove by the Doobie Brothers when they're like, let's go to Minnesota with Terrence Mann. So kind of this weird dichotomy, but it totally works because again, these songs are not current songs either. So it is kind of this time travel movie. You're supposed to feel these different things as you go through. It's timeless because it incorporates all these different genres and different songs from different eras.
I like how there are patient cues at times. So patient audio cues through the music when Karen, the daughter, comes over and says, there's a man out there on your lawn. And all of a sudden they start realizing what's happening, and you get a couple beats of it. And it does take it into that fantasy realm of, oh, okay, are we in the real world now, or have we just transported somewhere else? And then there's a little bit of dialogue. I think Kevin Costner speaking a little, but then it goes into the built out track that Horner did. And I thought that was done beautifully, being there, taking the step back, and then coming back full force. And that's, again, the kind of magic and mystical quality of this film.
There was not much dialogue in that whole scene too. There was just a lot of taking in the moment and going, and he's going to throw with Shoeless Joe Jackson, you know. I just like, he's like, I'm pitching it to Shoeless Joe Jackson. But that whole scene is such a great buildup. And you know, the part of this movie that gets me, that makes me look and say, okay, this was a great movie, was the faith reward. Kevin Costner had this faith. He was following this voice, which was making him do crazy things according to everybody else. And to me, you know, you're disking up all your corn here and putting a field in the middle. That's bravery. And then when we fast forward almost an entire year to the next season, and I'm thinking, oh, the strain. They're at the table, they're at their finances, discussing it, and it's the breaking point. That's the pivotal part of that moment, is that breaking point of, it's not that we need to lose the field, it's we're going to lose the farm. At that moment, everything has built up to now comes to life. Now the ghosts come onto the field. And it's almost that, like you're getting the faith call, and it always comes right before it's too late. It always comes right at that tipping point. Because the next conversation they would have had in that was, all right, well, maybe we have to get rid of the field and plant some corn. And then that's the moment, okay, now everything's going to build from here. And so I think it's great. The music adds to it. And so I think that helps out.
Yeah, it's a great catch, Corey. Yeah, it is up until that very moment where that happens. And it's also a natural segue into talking about vocal sounds, because sometimes it's kind of hard to figure out what the most important voiceover things are in a movie. In this one, it's crucial, right? There's 3 great ones. If you build it, he will come. Ease his pain and go the distance. Like, vital for moving the plot forward. And there's some debate about who actually did the voiceover. I've heard lots of different things. I don't really care. I don't think I really want to know.
Well, and the credits are fun because it says the voice played by himself.
That's right. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, just leave it. I don't want to know.
You tell me it's not Ed Harris?
Well, that's one of the rumors, but I don't want to know for sure. I want it to just be magical.
They've never commit to it. You don't know. I believe that's one of the primary names that has been thrown out there, but they've talked about Leota doing it. They've talked about maybe like a hybrid kind of thing. So it's super fun. It's like how they got the Porg noise, I guess, for Star Wars as well.
just leave it alone. Movie magic. Let's go ahead and transition down to performance. And I think we'll all agree the performances across the board are fantastic in this. Everybody's in the pocket. Nobody's overacting or melodramatic. And so I'm going to skip down to dialogue and start with you, Ross. And we'll see if we can pull out maybe 2, but we'll start with one line of dialogue that you really liked from this film that you think had some significance.
I thought, and I think it's especially, there are themes in this that are so relevant in today's landscape. And I know it wasn't meant then for what it can mean now. But Kevin Costner, at some point, talking about the field, says, anytime, they're all welcome here. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's just, that's who we should be. That's what baseball takes us back to, is just like, hey, this can be for everyone. This is Jackie Robinson. This is Hank Aaron. This is how are we making this okay for everyone to be a part of it right now? So to me, I thought that's one of two that I wrote out in this space. But I think that's super powerful and resonated with me for today's environment. But it was relative even back then, especially as, they have the book banning discussion earlier. There still are ties, and you know what? Americans are Americans, and a lot of the same things kind of resurface again and bubble up and simmer down. But it seems like we revisit them often.
Corey, why don't you drop in one of your lines of dialogue?
I tell you what, I've got a couple lines for the end that I'm going to say, but I'm gonna focus on this one because I love Ray Liotta so much, and it's because it's the point of this movie I look at and I think of all of these things about the could have beens that these 8 guys, the 8 men out of the White Sox, right, who were denied this. It's almost as if I looked up one description is because I was struggling trying to figure out, okay, what theme am I focusing on with this movie? And this idea that they're a purgatory, that they never got what they should have because of what they did. They were the 8 men out who cheated. Shoeless Joe Jackson, who they never were able to prove. That's the Breakheart story right there. Denied, but he's the first one on the field, gets more time on the field. And so I think of all of the stories that go in this, and then he says, he's talking to Ray about we brought in more people, and everybody wanted to come. Like, just all of a sudden there's this, you think of all these ghosts that just want to show up and start playing baseball again, right? There's legends. I'm sure Babe Ruth would have been in that conversation. And he talks about Ty Cobb, and he says, we didn't like him when he was alive, so we told him to stick it. And then he does his Ray Liotta laugh that is so sinister and so smirk. Goodfellas, Casino, Ray Liotta, and I just love it. The inner boil of turmoil that he has in his laugh that you cannot just get anybody to do. And but only Ray Liotta. And so I love that dialogue because it just showed, hey, everybody wants to come in here. There's more people that have to kind of fix and have some resolution to things that they could have been. And so it's kind of nice, but there's still a little bit of competitiveness and some of the voice, some of the swear words that they even threw in there. And I was like, man, this is a family film, and but that dialogue was great because it was the competition, the personality. It doesn't just go away just because they're ghosts and having to, come up here and get that last game in.
That's awesome. So I have tons, but I'm going to limit myself to 2, and I'm going to start with one. I'll end with the heartfelt one and kind of build off what you said about the competitiveness. And because I've always loved this line where Ray says to Shoeless Joe when he's going to pitch to him, "Don't we need a catcher?" And Shoeless Joe says, "Not if you get it near the plate, we don't."
Yeah.
It's arrogance, but like in the best possible way. He's just supremely confident. Like, yeah, I can handle this. This is going to be fine.
Yeah, it's very Hoosiers and my team's on the floor.
Yeah.
And it's that old school approach of, hey, you know what? We're doing it this way. And yeah, I love that as well. Just like, you know what? You get it near and I'll take care of this.
Yeah. Ross, why don't you go again? Give me another line of dialogue.
Okay. And this is with James Earl Jones, and Corey referenced it earlier, one of his kind of famous monologue at the end, but just one component of that I think resonates quite a bit is it's money they have, but peace they lack. And this is the end of the 80s. So we've just gone through all of the excess of the 80s. And is it reflecting back on that a little bit? Is that some of the storytelling is, yeah, you know what? All these people are living more complicated lives, but they've lost a little bit of themselves within it. So, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I heard that and I was just like, oh, that's really interesting. And especially knowing that we were at the end of a decade and a very famous, prosperous decade that brought about yuppies, that brought about big giant cell phones and Miami Vice and all of that good stuff. So being able to say that it's money they have, but peace they lack, as we're going to this place where we can hear grasshoppers and the crunch of the clay in the dirt. I think that's a nice play off of each other.
Yeah, I think that's a great read. And it's interesting, like, watching this movie as an adult, you pick up a lot of different things you didn't pick up as a kid. And that would probably be one of them. Corey, you got another line of dialogue?
I've got a couple, but I'm going to go with this one. It's the part where they're talking about James Earl Jones is talking about the field, and he says, "This field, this game, is part of our past. It reminds us of all that was good." And I thought, it's the part where Ray Liotta also says, it harkens back to the part where Ray Liotta says, "I love this game. It was just a game." But it wasn't just a game. It was everything. He loved it. He would play for food money because it was so much of who he was. And so it makes me think it is that very fabric that's woven in is games, hockey, baseball, all these sports that we all love, because there's people that don't love baseball. They love other sports, and that's okay. It's something that is meant to be a childhood thing that you enjoyed so much, that you had friends that you did things with and were so competition and camaraderie and team building and life lessons, and yet it turns out to be such an important foundation of a country, of a city, of a person, of a family, of everything, a team, to where here you are decades later as a ghost, and all of a sudden you need this closure. You need this closure. I need to go to this field because I'm going to show up and pay $20 to go watch a baseball for an afternoon. Like the people in the long line coming, they're showing up because they have to, because it's a fabric of something that represents all the nostalgia that we all miss and love and we look for.
I'm just going to let that linger for a second because that was beautiful.
It was a great build off of James.
Yeah. Nice.
So way to go, Corey.
And at some point we're going to have to talk about James Earl Jones because I'm a little confused on him.
Oh, we will. I'm going to cheat a little bit and reference the "Is This Heaven? It's Iowa," but I don't want to use that one because it's kind of a cliche. I'm going to go back to earlier in the film, and it's one of my favorite exchanges now between Ray and his wife, and I think it speaks volumes about their relationship and a lot about Annie. He says to her, "Do you think I'm crazy?" And she pauses and then says, "Yes," which is right there. That's amazing. And then says, "But I also think if you really feel that you should do this, then you should do it." And I just love that she is 100% behind him and she has not heard the voice at all. She's just like, I support you. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, she's all in. And it's almost unnerving how easy it is sometimes. But I think that's also some of the mystery of this film, and it shows that bond and their relationship with their daughter as well. Yeah. I think all three of them, there's a level of respect for their young daughter that the parents share with her that's kind of fascinating.
I'm glad you brought that up too, because I was just thinking something else just occurred to me. There's later on, there's an exchange right before he goes to find Terrence Mann that kind of plays into that too. It's like, if she's been believing too easily to this point, that's a scene that kind of solidifies why she would go through with it, right? She's like, we don't have the money, it's going to be trouble. And then is Fenway the one with the big wall in left field or whatever? In left field, yeah, the Green Monster. And then, yeah, we had the same dream. And it's like, okay, well, that's legitimate. Now you're in because you've been roped in. You're getting the voice in one form or another is talking to you too. It's not just you're taking this all on faith. So a little bit more realism in that sense. For body language and facial expressions, one thing I found in notes was just that I'm going to hopefully not butcher his name. Rod Dedew. Do you guys know who he is? He was the USC coach. He was hired as a baseball advisor, and he'd won tons of championships in college baseball. First time I'd ever heard his name. He was brought on along with Don Buford to coach the actors. So there's a reason that the baseball action looks as good as it does. So I had
Ray Liotta had never played baseball when he did this.
That's crazy.
Then why couldn't they get him to hit left-handed, though? Because Shoeless Joe's left-handed. And that always bugs me now.
Yeah, well, maybe they couldn't switch him over, but he was. I saw a thing that said Ray Liotta had never played baseball when he signed up to do this movie.
Well, he looks like a natural, though.
He does.
Well, and when you have that much time hanging out in the corn, you
Yeah,
can pick up the other side of the plate a little bit.
you bet.
You'd
60
think.
years.
But that's true. I get what you're saying. But I do love him just pounding his glove at the beginning in anticipation of the fly balls. No words. Like, he says so very little in that whole scene. And you just pointed out earlier, Corey, that there's hardly any music in that scene either. It's just sound effect and facial expression, body language. That tells the whole story.
And the sound effect on that duff hit he does when he first tries to hit to Shoeless Joe Jackson is absolutely brilliant. You hear the ball hit the ground and thump, thump, thump. And you can just tell he's embarrassed, like, I didn't even get it there. He's just looking at him. He's like,
I just dribbled it. It's not even a worm burner going down.
Yeah.
It is just a dribble off
I'm going
the
to take
bat.
5 steps and pick it up, and then I'm going to do it. I don't know if Kevin Costner did that on purpose or not, or if that was part of it, but it was perfect.
Yeah, his face is just crestfallen. Oh, man. All this, and then that happened. Would you guys have anything else for body language and facial expressions? I have a few more, but I want to.
I do. I got one that I want to point out. It's the body language of the other characters when Moonlight Graham walks off the field, and all the ghosts come stand right at the edge, and they've been calling him Rookie all day, and then they call him Doc when he comes back walking out because he's now old again, and that's a powerful scene. I think that's the scene that resonates with me so much, is because it's his quote where he says, "Well, there'll be other days. I didn't realize." He says, "We just don't realize life's most significant moments when they're happening. Back then I thought there will be other days. I didn't realize that was the only day." And it's such a powerful quote because it's the way that we all live. There's always another day. There's always tomorrow. I always got this. I'll take care of it then. I'll spend more time doing this. I'll figure that out. And the days slip through, and then you don't realize, that was the last day back then. And so here's a guy who spent his whole career was that one day, and he never got his at-bat. He finally does it. He winks at the pitcher. He gets his hit, does his RBI and everything. And he's having a great, and he steps off and gives it up. But it's an acknowledgement on his part because he's very content of I had 2 lives, the life that could have been, and I got a taste of it here, and I had a life that lived that was wonderful. And the respect of the other players as he's walking by, looking at him. It was very powerful. It's very tearful. And one that makes you tear up, I think, and choke up a bit. So I think the body language of other actors for one character's main scene is really powerful here.
Well, and the body language of those players who have been so macho and been so baseball the entire time, they put that in check. And that's more difficult. Like, you're out there playing an athlete, and now all of a sudden you're having to show respect through your body actions. And, some of them are shaking hands, some of them are patting on the shoulder. And, I love it just like with those flimsier caps that they're wearing of just those quick nods.
Yeah.
And all of it, we know those are communication methods that people use and that mean so much. And to earn that respect. And that's all he wanted, was the respect and to hear that he was good enough and could have made a difference. So, and now they're celebrating him almost more because he saved the daughter. Yeah. But he goes back through, and then Shoeless Joe gives him that final bit of, "Hey kid," and it's very Mean Joe Green with the towel and the Coke commercial. You know what? You did it. You belonged. You're good enough.
You were good enough. And it's the acknowledgement, what could have been would have been wonderful. But I had this path that I had, and that was wonderful too. So, which is the whole summation of what I think this movie is for me. Even though it's not necessarily a fan favorite movie, I'm not watching every year like Craig does, but I think I look at this movie and that sums it up. I'm looking at a fork of what could have been for these people, for all these characters, the 8 men out who cheated, what could have been for them, their careers, Doc, Terrence, all these people, Ray, what could have been, and then what they had at the end as a result of following this faith reward process.
Anything else you guys want to talk about with performance before we talk about setting design? The only other thing I had really was just we talked about already, the costumes, the cotton uniforms that absolutely feel authentic, and they're just so huge, and like it'd be hard to play in those, I think. But
Did you notice Ray wearing the same shirt the first day when he heard the voice and he goes out the door and talks to the farmers? Do you ever hear voices in the field? He's wearing a shirt. He's wearing that same shirt the day that Shoeless Jackson shows up. The same outfit.
I did not, but I'll have to look for that.
In my head, I looked at it as an acknowledgement of the first day when I heard the voice to the first day when they finally appear. And it, because this is over a year later. Snows come, winters come. This is the next spring. And so I thought it was just something that stood out to me just because I saw that shirt and I thought I wouldn't wear that shirt on a farm because I grew up on a farm. I wouldn't. It was too clean of a shirt to wear on a farm.
Well, and I think back, you brought up the snow on the field, and I think that's just, maybe this is back at cinematography, so sorry for jumping back.
No, not a problem.
But that longing, this is a kid at recess because it's raining or snowing out, so you can't go outside. So we all know that recess, when you were stuck inside, was just like, oh, really? I want to be outside running around. I want to be playing kickball, dodgeball, whatever you're doing. And seeing him there as the celebrations happening behind him, and he's just longingly looking out at this snow-dusted baseball field in his cornfield, wanting something to happen. I love that.
Ross, I'm going to tell you, I feel that way right now as spring is here and I'm in my classroom and the kids are doing work and stuff, and I look out the window behind me and it's sunny and it's looking nice out there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just want to be outside. So powerful. Nice.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that scene up, Ross, because I had that earlier for cinematography, but I didn't want to linger too much. But it's a beautiful scene, and that's so good. Setting and design, we've kind of touched on this already. I mean, this is another thing that's beautiful about slightly older. It's 34 years old now, Greg. Movies
we're old now. Yes.
We're old. I know. Shot on location. It's shot in Dubuque County, Iowa. You mentioned, Ross, earlier that there's the field is still there that they made for this film. And then, MLB has a adjacent field where they're actually playing games, which is great. And of course, Fenway Park is actually Fenway Park. And somewhere in there, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are hanging out as extras.
I think I saw them there. Yeah. There's a scene where two kids are walking up and it's Matt Damon's profile is very distinct.
Yeah.
And I see him walk, and it's just the outline of him. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's Matt Damon.
Yeah, I've never been able to find him. I have to keep looking. But for set decoration, I wanted to talk about, first off, no, actually, I guess it all boils down to Terrence Mann's place, because first off, it's the first door that doesn't have a chicken in the window, which is a great description. Yeah, he's in that kosher neighborhood, and you're just walking through, and there it is. But his office / house, I think, is interesting. It speaks to his personality. It's not very homey in there with all of the shelves and the boxes. But one thing I noticed this time that I don't think I'd ever noticed before is that he has a telescope. So he has this huge door that is absolutely designed to keep the world out. But he also has a telescope because he's not completely given up on the world. That's the way I look at that.
Is he a ghost?
Is Terrence Mann a ghost?
Well, because here's the question.
Okay.
Janice asked me this question at the end. When he walks off into the cornfield, he disappeared. He faded off right at the end. And we never see Terrence Mann again. We don't know what happened to his body. And so Janice said, wait, was he a ghost too? And so then I kind of rewound back and watched a couple scenes with him. And I thought, Doc was a ghost, right?
Yeah.
When he gets time traveled back into 1972, he kind of wipes the license plate off and sees it's 72. He sees the man walking, it's smokier a little bit, talks to him, has this whole experience with Doc, picks up his young ghost self, takes him to the field, and has that experience. Is Terrence Mann that as well? Because he stopped writing, or did he disappear? And I don't know. All of a sudden he's back in front of the car and he gets in the car and they go on this adventure to find Doc. I can't decide about that, because when she asked me that, I said, it is also a fan theory too, Craig. But I will tell you this, that before I knew it was a fan theory, my wife asked me that question.
Okay.
And so I am a fan of fan theories. but this was a fan theory we came up with that we realized, after I looked it up, this could have been a theory that is other people have thought as well. Because is he a ghost? Because you know why? Here's his resolution that Janice pointed out to me. Terrence Mann was bitter and angry throughout the whole show, like when Kevin Costner first met him. And so one of the things that we noticed was after he goes to write this, he's going out into the cornfield, he says, what a story to tell. He's going back to writing. He's found his passion. He's found his joy.
Yes.
His sight of what could have been him writing again. He gave up on all his writing. He gave up on his movement that never happened. Now he's going back to it, which is where he goes off into the cornfield. And Ray Liotta's comment about, you're not invited, but he is, makes me think that there might be some relevance to that idea. I don't know. You could disagree with me. I don't know what to say about that.
I do disagree. I have some evidence, some text evidence from the film to tell you why that's not.
Darn it!
Well,
let me live my dream.
I have two. The first one is that Mark, played by Timothy Busfield, who does not believe and does not see the ball players, sees him right away. Who's this? Elvis? And then the other thing is that he's in the newspaper as being missing. Hey, did you know you were missing?
And his dad,
his dad's looking for him. So that last one's not as strong, but I would go with Mark seeing him first. So
or missing because
I see that's
found his body
yet. Weaker that way, but okay. That's amazing. Ross, did you have anything under setting design you wanted to point out? Set decoration, props, any of that stuff?
Yeah. Again, just you're getting the bat bags. You're getting those details that they added that seem very simple. It is a lot of stuff that I could probably go get out of my garage right now and record some audio with and take pictures of. But how they did it was beautiful. And, it's acknowledging the beauty of the game and the elements of the leather, of that cotton, of, and we've talked about it before, the ball hitting the bat and making that cracking sound. And, I'm thinking even, as the balls are going into the cornfield and hearing that kind of thwap of hitting the corn as it's going through, it's a different sound than what you're getting somewhere else. So all of those elements and how that setting took us out of Fenway Park, took us out of a big field with tons of fans somewhere and simplified the elements of the game. Like this was so much of this game and film, I think, were just elemental and natural. And that's the beauty of what they did with the setting to help tell the story.
Again, I'm just going to let that linger for a minute because I don't want to step on that. But there's kind of a couple more fun things that I wanted to point out. This time, I've seen this movie, like I said, like every year. So I've probably seen it 20, 30 times. There is a brass bed upstairs in the Kinsella house. And that cannot be a coincidence after Shoeless Joe mentioned that they had brass beds in the hotels. I was just like, that's interesting. That didn't have to be there, but it was. I wanted to point that out. But I always loved when Ray somehow travels back to 1972, how they tell us that really, really quickly, where you have the Nixon campaign poster, you have Godfather on the theater marquee, and then, of course, he goes down and let me check the license plate, too. I just love it's so quick. And I just always love when they show instead of tell. Like, you don't have to, hey, I'm in 1972. It's just, these are just touchstones from that era. So,
well, and even that film marquee, there were two opportunities here, and this one was more dialogue, I guess. But we're getting The Godfather and paying homage to that here, this amazing film. But then there's also Annie making fun of Ray earlier and saying, he found his old bat. And its name was Rosebud, right. With the reference to Citizen Kane. I was just like, I love these little gems dropped in. And again, there's so many aspects of love letters within this film to different things, and these little baby name drops to films. I mean, not even baby. You're getting a full marquee there. It's not an accident what film they chose. Like, because it could have been 71 and this other film instead. This director probably loves The Godfather.
Mm-hmm.
And, yep, I learned at my film school, probably had to watch Stagecoach, probably had to watch, all these other foundational films. But Citizen Kane and The Godfather getting calls out, I thought was very cool.
And It's a Wonderful Life.
Yes.
That was the playing on the TV. I think that was an intentional choice just to kind of show here's a world of what ifs. And
oh, yeah. So let's move down to characters. And let's see if I know you wanted to talk about Terrence Mann. I'm assuming was he a ghost there?
That was my moment.
I wanted to point out that is J.D. Salinger in the book, because this is a book adaptation. We haven't talked about that to this point. The book's name was Shoeless Joe, and so was J.D. Salinger in the book. But apparently Salinger threatened the production with a lawsuit if they use his name. So they just turned him into Terrence Mann, which is fine. I love how cranky he is at the beginning. And then you have that he softens. I don't even remember thinking that. He's so rude at the beginning, but he somehow goes along with it because Kevin Costner has his hand in his jacket like it's a gun. And initially, or he takes pity on him. I don't know. You're a pacifist.
He's gonna hit him with a crowbar. Yeah. You're a pacifist. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, Ray in the flat or apartment or whatever you want to call it, Ray is the worst communicator alive at that point, because he could have just said, "Hey, can I take you to a baseball game?"
Yeah.
And it turned into this whole back and forth of, I still can't believe he didn't use the crowbar on him, but it would have made for a much different movie, obviously.
Yeah.
But that was a funny part. And that's kind of, Kevin Costner is so warm in this, but he's also very goofy and awkward at times. And that's not a bad thing. It is just kind of, this guy's trying to figure out everything as he goes along. And I thought that was an interesting component to his performance.
Yeah, it is one of the least confident Costner roles that I can think of. Like, he's usually pretty confident.
Somewhat bumbling in that part, yeah.
Yeah. Other characters that we haven't, we talked about Moonlight Graham. We didn't mention Burt Lancaster, his final film role. He's just amazing. Just, I don't know if chewing scenery is not quite the right phrase, but he's magnetic.
His delivery is great. His facial features, there's tight shots on his face so that you see him because his eyes do several things when he talks, and it just really draws you in, to that old charm that he has. So
yeah, he almost looks fake. Like, it's that much of a fake. There were Charles Bronson elements of his face to me as I'm looking at him, and it's just this powerful thing that stands out where you're just like, I wonder if some of these amazing special effects artists today could replicate how he looks, in practical makeup. Because it just stands out. And like you said, it's so powerful and commanding, and it makes you believe that he's this successful doctor that could have been a professional athlete. It's like, yeah, of course you're that person. You're built this way. You're that percentage of people that have this gift that can do all of these special things and kind of be a natural from one to the next.
Yeah, and speaking of It's a Wonderful Life, and there's also clips from Harvey in there too. I read that Jimmy Stewart was offered the role, but turned it down. And that would have been an interesting choice. I don't know if I would have liked that as much as Burt Lancaster, though.
Burt's delivery is too good.
Yeah, there's just a little
telling the stories.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why you'd go that way, but like, there's just gravitas with Lancaster that I don't think there quite is with Jimmy Stewart. They're just different actors.
Well, I didn't write down the name of the actor, but the young Moonlight Graham, like, that was just a breath of fresh air, and that was fun to see, and that was that's that kid that you see waiting to go play the game or to get picked up by his parents afterwards because they may have forgot or they're running late to pick him up after practice or his game. But just that youthful exuberance of, I just want to play ball. And that's all that matters. It's a summer day. I'm meeting my friends at the Diamond, and we're going to waste 4 hours here screwing around and have a blast.
Yeah, Frank Whaley is his name. He's been in tons of things. I loved in that at that point in the movie. It's okay. It's Deus Ex Machina. It is. This movie the plot will go in any direction. Time travel, younger ghost, but we don't care because it's still magical. It still works.
Well, and I think that's the delivery of the line that Moonlight gives. Old Moonlight. What's his name again? I just blanked on his name. Who plays old Graham? Moonlight Graham. Dr. Graham.
Burt Lancaster.
Burt Lancaster. Oh my gosh. That's the line that he says, because he says he describes his wish about looking down at a pitcher and winking at him and stretching a triple or double into a triple and sliding into the base, which he does as a young guy. And he says, "That's my wish, Ray Kinsella. That's my wish. Is there enough magic out there in the moonlight to make this dream come true?" And it's like you said, Craig, it's we don't know where the story's going to go, but there's magic involved here, and we're just along for the ride.
Let's see. Anything else for characters, or should we just go ahead and move down to Hero's Journey? I think we're good. So, for Hero's Journey, not really the typical Hero's Journey, but I just had that it's a story of reconciliation for Ray and his father, and a restoration of Ray's faith in family and in himself.
Yeah, I think to kick it off, we obviously have the call to adventure and some supernatural aid that's there as well. So
yeah.
there are those elements coming in, and I mean, there can't be a more literal call to adventure. Yeah. And it resurfaces multiple times to take him through that hero's journey and get to the part where he has to accomplish all of these things for the good of others. And at the end, it results in him getting that opportunity to have a catch with his father. And that's fun. Like my baseball memory with my dad, and it's one that he laughs about still today. I was on second base probably as a 12-year-old, and I'm paying attention to the signs from the third base coach. And all of a sudden the third base coach is like, back, back, back. I got picked off at second. My dad had been talked into being the umpire for second base. So I'm sitting there in the dirt looking up at him, and he punches me out. And he's just like, after the game, he's like, "Oh, that's the worst thing I've ever had to do in sports." Oh. But it's something that I still remember today. And I remember just being there reaching for the bag and looking up just like, oh, what's he going to say here? And I was absolutely out.
Yeah.
But you never know. And great honesty and everything like that. But he was just like, he gave that kind of squint of, oh, I hate doing this to you, but you're out. So that's fun to me.
Love it. Yeah, it actually fits the paradigm for Hero's Journey pretty well. And thanks for sharing that story, Ross. It's a great story.
A great story.
It's a good lesson to learn early on. For world building, I just said it's solidly grounded in our world, but it's somewhat idealistic. But then that's what makes the fantasy that much more powerful. We talked about the lighting and the sounds, but you have no idea where it's going because we don't know what the rules are.
Yeah.
I don't know if they knew what the rules were. It's just like, oh, this is good here. This will work here.
Throw this in too. Why not? So let's go ahead and talk about our final thoughts as we wrap up. Ross, why don't you start your final thoughts on Field of Dreams?
This has been super fun, and this discussion, and finding the elements of, sometimes it's hard to go back and watch an older movie again. It holds up, but it's still older. So it has taken a little bit more time to warm up. This discussion has definitely helped me enjoy it more. And and I don't know if this becomes an annual thing for me, like The Natural and 42 and even Major League. Like, those are three, and I'll throw Naked Gun in there as well. Like, those are movies for me where I'm just like, okay, this is baseball that I really love. But there are elements.
Palazzo.
There,
It's Enrico Palazzo.
But there are those elements here, and when I do need a good example, or if the Giants start struggling this year, and I just need to take it back to basics, I want to hear that crunch of the shoes in the dirt again, and take it back to there, and kind of this gives a palate cleanser for a baseball fan, I think.
Corey?
Yeah, I would agree there. I think you point out like Major League, Naked Gun, the Mariners in that scene.
Oh yeah.
When you look at those are great movies. They're fun movies. They're baseball movies. But when you look at this is more than that. The whole movie is discussing stats. He's telling his daughter about stats. He's talking about Shoeless Joe. And then when Shoeless Joe comes on and he's talking about, I'd have played for nothing, and describes, I love the sights, the sounds, the crowd, the smells, everything. It's all nostalgia. It's all baseball feel, which is what that passion is for that. And then in the middle of it, you also get a magic in the movie where there's enough magic to make everyone's dream come true, to get everybody that one last chance to see what could have been, or a couple more moments in the sun to play the game. And I think that's what makes this movie a passionate movie. That's what makes people love this movie. And so I think it's great. I do appreciate having watched it again after it's been probably a 20-year hiatus, I think. So it does harken me back. It makes me think there is more to this than just, the Field of Dreams. It's a great movie. So I'm glad we picked it and went with this. And I will say this. I do also think it's the second most misquoted movie of all time. Both movies, which involve James Earl Jones, which is kind of odd. The Luke, I am your father, which never said the word Luke. And then in this one, it says, always misquoted as, if you build it, they will come. It never said that. It always said, if you build it, he will come. So, but that's because I think it's such a staple of American cinema now that you look and you say, this movie, that line in this movie fits in here the way that baseball fits in the backbone of America.
Great point.
Yeah, you guys are just killing it. So I have so little to say. I said it before, and I'll say it again. This film, I think, holds up beautifully. Like, there are only a handful of things, like the microfiche, that kind of pull me out for a moment as being somewhat dated. It still feels fresh to me, and it just always makes me feel good. So when I want to jump into that nostalgia feeling, or just want to feel good in general, like, I'll throw this on and get excited about it again. I know what it's doing. I know it's manipulating me, but I just don't care. I enjoy the movie thoroughly, and I'm glad we talked about this movie. I'm getting excited for baseball season. It's just refresh. So, we had to pick a baseball movie. This is one of my favorites, and go Giants.
Go Giants, and go Mariners, Corey. You're on the other side of baseball for me there, so I'm happy to say give you a go Mariners as well.
Yeah. Well, and that's the game first game that I ever went to was a Mariners game. So I mean, that's the first pro game I ever saw in the Kingdome. Ken Griffey Jr.
Nice.
So,
well, and Craig, you were Candlestick Park, correct?
Well, my first, actually, now that you say it, my first Major League Baseball game I went to was 1985 Mariners in the Kingdome versus the Boston Red Sox. And I don't remember who was pitching for either team. I remember Alvin Davis was one of the players for the Mariners at the time. That was my first baseball game live.
The first I remember is going again with my dad to Memorial Stadium and the Baltimore Orioles hosting the Detroit Tigers, and watching Lou Whitaker and Alan Trammell hit back-to-back home runs to beat my team.
Not so nice, but I remember those players so well. So let's do, okay. So one last thing. I just thought of this. Most important or best, just pick a baseball game, your favorite baseball game that you've been to, because I just want to share one that I have. And I don't care who goes first.
So I can pick almost any Giants game as a special game to me, but I did get to go to the 21-31 Cal Ripken game at Camden Yards. I don't know that many sporting experiences will ever build up to what that was, and the 21-minute standing ovation where my hands were numb. And it was just like, are we still doing this? Like, do we still need to be doing this? But no one wanted to be the one to stop it. So it kept going, and what a special moment for an amazing athlete who accomplished so much. So, that's where, Craig, we brought it up during the recording for the album Cockpit podcast that you were on with me discussing your baseball album. But that's my black and orange baseball teams. I've got the Giants, but I've kind of got the Orioles in my back pocket because that's who I grew up with.
Corey, what about you? Do you got a favorite baseball game memory?
Oh man. Yes, I got one. I went to the Seattle Mariners game in the Kingdom. I was a youth director, and one of my first years at a church when I was younger, right out of college, 96, somewhere in there. And we all had shirts, and I had spent the night writing Mariners on the shirts, on a big M and the A and the R. And we got on TV. We were standing up in the crowd.
Nice.
And we all had white shirts, and we got on TV. That, and then the other one was the local one, the Tri-City Dust Devil game. Back then it was called the Posse. I took the youth group there. Brought my glove. Ball comes pop fly right over the back. I happened to be there, and I caught it. And had my glove, haven't been a baseball player, just that catch, not a drop. And it was just a nice, good, crisp sound, like you said, that crispness. I still can hear it. It just is great. And people applauded and cheered like I had done something great. And I was like, I caught a ball. So
nice.
That was a great moment.
All right. 2001, 9/11 happens, and that baseball stops for a week. And this is the year that Bonds hit 73, and he's just hitting a home run literally every other day. And what happened with the Giants schedule is they took their homestand and bumped it to the end of the season. So they were going to finish on the road, but they ended up finishing at home against the Dodgers. And my friend Brent, God bless him, got tickets to that game. He called me up. I was living in San Diego at the time, and said, "Hey, I'm going to the game." And I was like, "Dude, you suck." He's like, No, I got an extra ticket. You're going too.
Yes.
So I flew up to like Sacramento and had to drive down. It was all weird because I'd find places to stay, and that was just bizarre. Just getting there was like, I was just running adrenaline the whole time.
The hero's journey.
Yeah, it was the hero's journey.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, and I've told this story many times, walking into the park and seeing all of because he'd hit, 2 home runs 2 nights before to break the record. He hit 71 and he hit 72, and there was these shirts of like 71 and 72. And I was just like, if he hits another home run, those shirts are pointless. Like, I could buy one on the way out, and it's going to be the same. And sure enough, first inning, he goes yard, and it was just like, yep, that's what we came for. It was just amazing that happened. I got to see that. And another kind of just coda to that too is that was supposed to be, when it was earlier scheduled, was supposed to be the 50th anniversary of Bobby Thompson's Shot Around the World. They postponed that ceremony until the next year. And I went to that game too, not knowing that it was the same thing. So I have a ticket stub and a program that have dates for a game that never happened on that day.
That's fun.
A year separately. So I remember just like, hey, let me look at this date. Oh my goodness. How did this happen? So, but yeah, I was there for Bond 73. And so that's kind of
Were you in the vicinity where it was hit, or were you on the side watching it go?
We were in center field. And so you could tell when he launched it, because he hit it to right field, hit it right into the arcade. As soon as he hit it, it was like, and it was like a guy threw like knucklers. So it was all Bonds. It was like a 50-mile-an-hour pitch, and it was all him. He was like out on his front foot and just muscled it out. Ross Stripling, I think, was the guy that threw it.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, first inning. It was like, he might hit another one, but really that's what we came to see.
Yeah,
So-
that's history right there, and one of the greatest swings ever, as far as I'm concerned. So,
Absolutely.
I am absolutely biased, but it will.
Ken Griffey was good too. His swing was
He
magical.
was very
That
yes.
swing was gorgeous, and just put on the baseball hat backwards, and that's iconic as well.
Yeah. So, Ross, before we get out of here, I want to give you a chance to just plug what you got going on. You mentioned briefly earlier, but I want you to have the floor. The floor is yours. What's going on with you? What kind of things can we look forward to from you?
Yeah, if you are a music fan, I've got the album Cockpit Podcast, which is on Spotify, and only Spotify because I can actually play the music in the podcast. So it's kind of taking the journey from track 1 through the final track of an album and breaking it down, and stories that people have. So think about your favorite album. What stories do you associate with it? Was this your first slow dance? Was this, hey, this was the road trip going to this place? Where's the music taking you? So I'm enjoying that. I've now recorded 8 episodes for it. So this is only about 2 months old. But I'm having a blast, and it's letting me connect with new friends, reconnect with old friends, and learn from people. So trying to get a very diverse audience for it. And then if you just want to contact me, Ross Hollebon on Twitter.
Nice. Yeah. And we'll have some stuff for that in the show notes as well. So as we close, we just want to say thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook, email us at readingbetweenreels@gmail.com, or use the SpeakPipe app on our website. If you enjoyed the show, please tell a friend. Our next episode will be a review of Back to the Future with special guest, New York Times bestselling author Ian Desher. And we have another announcement. We're giving one lucky listener a digital copy of the Back to the Future trilogy. Look for the pinned tweet on our Twitter profile and retweet and like the tweet to enter. Giveaway ends on 4/11/23. The winner will be announced on the next episode of Reading Between the Reels. And if you'd like to contribute to our next show, send us an email or voicemail about your favorite moments from Back to the Future, and we'll share it on the next episode.